She said she was innocent. She said she was alone. But when the Comanche warrior returns to the scene, the earth tells a different story. One of betrayal, secrets, and a hidden past that could change everything. What did he find in the tracks she left behind? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Texas plains stretched endlessly beneath a merciless sun, waves of heat shimmering across the dried grasslands like ghostly dancers. It was the summer of 1867, and the frontier remained a brutal place where survival depended on strength, cunning, and the ability to read the signs that nature left behind. In this unforgiving landscape, two worlds collided with the force of thunder: the Comanche nation fighting to preserve their ancestral lands, and the white settlers pushing relentlessly westward with dreams of conquest and new beginnings. Takoda was his name, though few white men had ever heard it spoken aloud. At 28 years old, he stood as one of the most formidable warriors of his tribe, his reputation built not merely on his prowess in battle, but on his extraordinary ability to track any living creature across any terrain. His jet-black hair fell past his shoulders, occasionally braided with eagle feathers that signified his accomplishments in both war and peace. His physique was that of a man who had spent every day of his life training his body. Broad shoulders, powerful arms marked with traditional tattoos that told the story of his lineage, and a chest that bore the scars of ceremonies and conflicts alike. His face was striking, with high cheekbones, intense dark eyes that seemed to pierce through deception, and a strong jawline that spoke of determination and unwavering resolve. 3 days earlier, a raid had occurred near the settlement of Fort Griffin. A group of Comanche warriors, not from Takoda's immediate band but from a neighboring one, had attacked a small homestead. The reasons were complex, rooted in years of broken treaties, stolen land, and the systematic destruction of the buffalo herds that sustained the Comanche way of life. In the chaos of the raid, a woman had been taken captive. Her name was Catherine May Holland, a 26-year-old woman whose beauty was notable even in her current disheveled state. Golden hair that caught the sunlight like spun wheat, striking blue eyes that held both fear and defiance, and features that would have turned heads in any city back east. She had been living with her brother and his family, trying to build a life in this harsh frontier. Now, Catherine sat on the ground near the center of the Comanche camp, her hands bound loosely with leather strips, her dress torn and stained from the journey. The camp itself was a temporary one, set up near a creek where cottonwood trees provided some relief from the brutal heat. Teepees formed a loose circle, and the air was filled with the sounds of daily life: children playing, women working on hides, men tending to horses. But there was tension in the air, a sense that something was about to change. Takoda approached the captive with measured steps, his moccasins making barely a whisper against the earth. He had been away when Catherine was brought to the camp, returning only this morning from a scouting expedition. The elders had asked him to assess the situation, to use his skills to determine the truth of what had happened during the raid. There were conflicting stories, and decisions needed to be made about Catherine's fate. He knelt down a few feet from her, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Catherine met his gaze briefly, then looked away, her jaw set in a stubborn line. She had been questioned multiple times since her capture, and she had maintained the same story consistently. She had been alone at the homestead when the raiders came. Her brother and his family had been away at a neighboring farm, and she had been taken by force without provocation. "You speak English," Catherine said suddenly, her voice hoarse from lack of water and days of crying. It was not a question, but a statement, based on the way Takoda's eyes registered understanding when others spoke in her language. "I speak many tongues," Takoda replied, his English accented but clear. He had learned it from traders and from a missionary who had briefly lived near his tribe years ago, before the wars intensified. "I understand more than people think." Catherine swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. "Then you understand that I'm innocent. I was taken from my home. I'm a victim here. Your people attacked us without reason." Takoda's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, not anger, but a deep sadness mixed with skepticism. "Without reason," he repeated softly, as if testing the words on his tongue. Your people came to our lands. Your people killed our buffalo. Your people broke every promise made in treaties signed with your own hands. But yes, tell me about reasons." The sharpness in his tone made Catherine flinch, but she pressed on. "I didn't do any of those things. I'm just a woman trying to survive. My brother brought me here after our parents died. I had nowhere else to go." "Where is your brother now?" Takoda asked, leaning forward slightly. His proximity made Catherine acutely aware of his physical presence, the strength evident in every line of his body, the intelligence burning in those dark eyes. "He went to Fort Richardson with his wife and children 3 days before the raid. They were getting supplies and visiting my sister-in-law's family. I stayed behind because someone needed to watch the homestead, tend to the animals." Takoda nodded slowly, absorbing this information. "You were alone for 3 days." "Yes, a woman alone on the frontier. This is dangerous, no?" Catherine bristled at the implied judgment. "I can take care of myself. I had a rifle. I knew how to use it. Yet you were captured. There were too many of them. I tried to fight, but..." She stopped, realizing she was becoming defensive. "What does it matter? Nothing I did justifies what happened." Takoda stood up, his tall frame blocking out the sun for a moment, casting Catherine in shadow. "Tomorrow I will visit the place where you were taken. I will read what the earth has to say about that day. The land does not lie, Catherine May Holland. It remembers everything." The use of her full name startled her. "How do you know my name?" "Your brother's family had a Bible. Inside the front cover, names were written. Your name among them." He paused, then added, "I can read your language as well as speak it." With that, Takoda walked away, leaving Catherine to contemplate his words. Around her, the camp continued its rhythms, but she felt increasingly isolated, trapped not just by her physical bonds, but by the growing sense that her carefully constructed story was about to crumble. That night, as stars filled the vast Texas sky, Takoda sat outside his teepee smoking a pipe and thinking about the white woman. There was something about her story that did not sit right with him, inconsistencies that his trained mind had already begun to identify. But there was also something else, something he was reluctant to acknowledge. She stirred something in him beyond mere professional curiosity. Despite the circumstances, despite the gulf between their worlds, he found himself drawn to her strength, her defiance in the face of fear. His closest friend, a warrior named Kohana, joined him by the small fire. "You are troubled, brother," Kohana observed, settling down beside him. Kohana was shorter than Takoda, but powerfully built, with a scar running down his left cheek from a battle years ago. "The white woman's story has holes in it," Takoda replied, passing the pipe to his friend. "Tomorrow I will know the truth, and if she has lied, what then?" Takoda was silent for a long moment, watching smoke curl into the night sky. "Then we must decide if her lies come from fear or from something darker. The raid that brought her here resulted in the death of 2 of our young warriors. If she bears responsibility for that, justice must be served." "You sound like you do not wish to find her guilty." Takoda met his friend's eyes. "I wish to find only the truth, whatever that may be." But even as he spoke these words, Takoda knew that Kohana was right to sense his hesitation. Something about Catherine May Holland had reached through the barriers of language, culture, and conflict to touch something deep within him. Tomorrow, when he examined the site of the raid, his tracking skills would reveal the truth, and depending on what he found, both their fates would be forever altered. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling upward toward the stars, and in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song to the moon. Dawn broke over the Texas plains with breathtaking beauty, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that seemed to set the very horizon ablaze. Takoda rose before the sun, preparing himself for the journey ahead. He gathered his tracking tools, a leather pouch containing various items he might need, his knife, a water skin, and his bow with a quiver of arrows. Though he did not expect trouble, the frontier was unpredictable, and a wise warrior never ventured out unprepared. Catherine had barely slept, her mind racing with anxiety about what Takoda might discover. She had watched him prepare from across the camp, noting the methodical way he moved, the quiet confidence in every gesture. When he approached her, accompanied by 2 other warriors, including Kohana. Her heart began to pound. "You will come with me," Takoda announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You will show me where the raid happened, and you will tell me again your story while we stand on the ground where it occurred. Sometimes, being in the place where truth was broken helps people remember correctly." Catherine stood on trembling legs, her hands still bound. "I've told you everything, there's nothing more to say." "Then you have nothing to fear from this journey," Takoda replied evenly. He nodded to one of the warriors, who brought forward a painted mare. "You will ride. We have many miles to cover." The journey took most of the morning. Catherine rode in silence, flanked by the 3 Comanche warriors, her mind desperately trying to anticipate what Takoda might find. The homestead came into view around midday, a simple wooden structure with a small barn, a corral for horses, and a well. The place looked abandoned now, eerie in its stillness. Burned patches on the ground marked where fires had been set during the raid, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. Takoda dismounted with fluid grace and immediately began his examination. He moved like a predator, low to the ground, his fingers touching the earth, reading signs that were invisible to untrained eyes. Catherine watched with growing dread as he circled the property, pausing here and there to study something more closely. Kohana and the other warrior, whose name was Takoda mentioned was Hanska, stood guard but also observed their friend's work with evident respect. "Tell me again what happened," Takoda called out, without looking up from where he crouched near the well. "From the beginning. Where were you when the warriors arrived?" Catherine's mouth went dry. "I was inside the house, preparing the midday meal. I heard horses approaching and looked out the window. When I saw they were Comanche, I grabbed my rifle and tried to bar the door, but there were too many of them. They broke through, and I fought but was overwhelmed." Takoda stood slowly, his face unreadable. He walked to the house and entered, emerging a few minutes later with something in his hand. It was a piece of fabric, blue calico, torn and stained. "This was found inside near the back window. It matches your dress." "Yes, it tore during the struggle," Catherine said quickly. Perhaps too quickly. "Interesting," Takoda murmured. He moved to the corral, studying the ground there with intense concentration. Then he walked a wide circle around the entire property, sometimes kneeling, sometimes standing perfectly still as if listening to voices only he could hear. Finally, he returned to where Catherine stood with the other warriors. "Your story has truth in it, but also lies," Takoda announced, his dark eyes boring into hers. "The earth tells me many things, Catherine May Holland. It tells me that yes, there was a raid here 3 days ago. It tells me that yes, horses carrying warriors came from the east and left heading northwest. But it also tells me other things, things that make your story fall apart like a poorly woven basket." Catherine felt her face flush. "I don't know what you mean. I've told you the truth." "Have you?" Takoda's voice was sharp now, commanding. "Then explain to me why there are tracks showing that you walked freely around this property the morning of the raid, feeding chickens, drawing water from the well, hanging washing on a line. Not the actions of a woman who stayed inside preparing a meal. I did those things earlier before. Explain to me why the ground near the barn shows signs that you met with someone there, stood talking for a long time. Boot prints. A white man's boots. Large ones. Someone who smoked tobacco because I found the remains of a rolled cigarette, still fresh when the rain came 2 nights ago, which means it was left there the day of the raid or just before." Catherine's face had gone pale. "I don't... Explain to me," Takoda continued, his voice rising with barely controlled anger, "why there are signs that you packed bags, loaded them onto a horse, and prepared to leave this place before the warriors ever arrived. Explain to me why the tracks show you actually walked out to meet the raiding party, waved them toward the homestead, and why one of our warriors died because he was shot from inside the barn, not the house. Shot by someone who was waiting in ambush. Shot by someone you knew was there." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's legs seemed to give out, and she sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Kohana and Hanska exchanged glances, their expressions hardening as they understood the implications of what Takoda had discovered. "Please," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "Please let me explain. It's not what you think. I never wanted anyone to die." Takoda knelt down in front of her, his face close to hers. Despite his anger, there was something else in his eyes now, a desperate need to understand. Then tell me the truth. All of it. Now. Catherine took a shuddering breath, her whole body trembling. My brother's family did go to Fort Richardson. That part was true. But they weren't coming back. They were leaving me here, abandoning me because they couldn't afford to feed another mouth. My brother's wife hated me, always saw me as a burden. They took everything of value when they left and gave me nothing, not even enough food to last a week. She wiped her tears with her bound hands, struggling to continue. I was desperate, alone, terrified of what would happen to me. Then a man came, a trader named Garrett Boone. He'd been through before, had shown interest in me. He found me here, said he could help me get to Santa Fe, start a new life. But he wanted something in return. What did he want? Takoda's voice was dangerously quiet. Information. He was selling guns to different tribes, playing all sides. He wanted to know the patterns of Comanche movements in the area, and he knew I'd seen warriors pass by the homestead before. I told him what little I knew, and in return, he promised to take me away from here. Catherine's voice dropped to barely a whisper, but he wanted more. He wanted to stage something that would bring soldiers out, create chaos that he could profit from. He said if we made it look like I was captured during a raid, it would bring the cavalry, create an opportunity for him to sell more weapons to both sides. So you betrayed your own people and mine, Takoda said, his voice cold with fury. You set a trap. No, I swear I didn't know he planned to kill anyone. He said he'd fire some warning shots, make it look like there'd been a fight. When the warriors came, I was supposed to pretend to be terrified, let them take me. Garrett said he'd track the party, negotiate my release, and we'd use the chaos to disappear together. But when your warriors arrived, Garrett opened fire for real. He killed one of them immediately, and another was mortally wounded trying to reach cover. The warriors fought back, killed Garrett, and then took me because they thought I was truly a victim. I tried to tell them during the journey, but no one would listen, and I was so frightened that I just kept lying. The weight of her confession hung in the air like a physical thing. Takoda stood abruptly, pacing away from her, his fists clenched. Kahana spoke in Comanche, his words rapid and angry, clearly demanding justice for the fallen warriors. Hanska joined in, both men calling for Catherine's death, but Takoda held up his hand, silencing them. He stood with his back to Catherine, staring out at the endless plains, wrestling with emotions that threatened to overwhelm his usually controlled demeanor. Finally, he turned back, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of judgment. 2 men died because of your desperation and foolishness. One of our warriors, Miwok, left behind a wife and 2 children who now have no father. The white trader, whatever his crimes, also died. You created death where there might have been peace, even if only for a moment. He paused, studying her tear-stained face. But you were also abandoned, used, and desperate. Your people failed you as much as you failed them. Catherine looked up at him, hope and fear warring in her blue eyes. What will you do with me? Takoda was quiet for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his words surprised everyone present, including himself. I will not kill you, Catherine May Holland, but neither will I simply let you go. You will return to our camp, and you will work to repay the debt you owe. You will help Miwok's widow, learn our ways, and prove through action that your remorse is real. And I will watch you, guide you, and decide when or if you have earned the right to choose your own path again. The journey back to the camp was marked by a heavy silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of hooves against the hard-packed earth and the whisper of wind through the tall grass. Catherine rode with her head bowed, the weight of her confession pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. She had expected death, had braced herself for it, and now found herself in a strange limbo where her fate remained uncertain, but her life had been spared. She did not understand why Takoda had chosen mercy, but she could feel the intensity of his gaze whenever he looked her way, a mixture of anger, disappointment, and something else she could not quite identify. When they arrived at the camp as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, word of Catherine's deception spread quickly. The atmosphere grew tense, with many tribal members calling for harsh punishment. An emergency council was convened, with the elders gathering in the center of the camp to hear Takoda's full report and decide Catherine's ultimate fate. She was made to stand before them while Takoda recounted everything he had discovered, his tracking skills having unveiled the complete truth of what had transpired at the homestead. The eldest among them, a weathered man named Hototo, whose face bore the lines of 7 decades of life, listened carefully before speaking. The woman's actions, whether born of desperation or malice, resulted in the death of one of our finest young warriors. Miwok was a good man, a provider, a protector. His family now suffers because of her choices. What justice do you propose, Takoda? You who uncovered this truth must also recommend the response to it. Takoda stood tall, his voice steady.